Hi, my name is Robert Chelle with Chelle Law, and I'm an attorney that assists nurse practitioners with employment contract and independent contractor agreement issues. Today I'm going to talk about claims made versus occurrence malpractice insurance for nurse practitioners. So what are the main differences between the two, and then what are some things you need to think about? So first, there's two main types of coverage for an NP. You have occurrence and claims made. So an occurrence policy simply means a policy has to be in effect when the malpractice event occurs, and therefore you are covered forever based upon whatever you did for that specific employer. Whereas with a claims made policy, it means a policy has to be in effect when the claim is actually made, so when you are sued. So there can be a gap in between when you leave the employer and your contract is terminated. Because with a claims made policy, as soon as you leave the employer, your policy is terminated, it ends. So there's going to be a gap between when you leave the employer and then the last day you can be sued. For in most states, that's 2 years. So you'll need an additional policy called tail insurance that covers that gap in between when you leave and then the last day you can be sued. And then who pays for tail is completely contractual, meaning it's going to be spelled out in your employment contract who's responsible to pay for tail insurance. Ideally, the employer would pay it, although it's not uncommon if you're in like a private physician-owned practice, or if you're in a state where NPs are autonomous, maybe you're with another NP, that they would shift the responsibility for tail onto the nurse practitioner. So let's talk costs. So why would somebody have one versus the other? Well, if you're in a smaller owned practice, it's cheaper to have a claims made policy, about a third cheaper per year. And so what most practices will do, they'll obtain a claims made policy for the nurse practitioner, they'll pay for it, but then they'll say in the contract that the NP is responsible for tail. Now, tail insurance is around twice what your annual premium is. So let's say for an NP, somewhere between $1,500 to $2,000 would be a standard amount for malpractice insurance per year. And so you would just double that. And so let's say you had a $2,000 annual policy, just double that, and that's $4,000, and then you would have to pay that. It's a one-time payment, so you don't have to pay it every year. You just pay it once, right? But you would secure it before you left the current employer, and then you're kind of covered. There are different tail amounts, meaning it could be for 2 years, it could be indefinite. Generally, I think an indefinite policy makes the most sense. It's a little bit more expensive, but kind of gives you peace of mind. Now, an occurrence policy is about a third more expensive per year, and you don't need tail. So if it's up to the NP and the employer is paying for it, well, it's kind of a no-brainer. You want them to get occurrence. If you're working as an independent contractor, most of the time you'll be responsible to pay for your own malpractice insurance. So in that scenario, I would also suggest getting an occurrence policy. If you just do the math, even though it's a third more expensive per year, maybe you're moving jobs, frequently, it just makes sense to get the occurrence policy, and then you don't have to worry about tail insurance. Now, as far as negotiating tail insurance, meaning who pays for it, it is completely negotiable. There's no rule or law that says you have to pay for it. Some employers will just say, no, we're going to shift the onus onto the NP. Some successful strategy that we've had is to kind of tie the length of time with the employer to the percentage that the employer will cover. So let me give you an example. Let's say the NP is going to stay there for a minimum of 4 years. You would say, all right, if I complete 1 year, you pay for 25% of the tail. If I stay for 2 years, you pay for 50, 375. If I stay 4, you pay the entire amount. Some employers are okay with that because at least over a 4-year period, they've more than made up whatever your tail cost is going to be. So some employers are okay with that. Another strategy for not paying would be nose coverage, and basically that means your new employer pays your old tail. Some employers are okay doing that. I mean, for any kind of NP, as I said before, the amount is not prohibitively expensive. So certainly is something, perhaps instead of a signing bonus, you have them pay your old tail. And then lastly, if you stay with the same insurance company, so maybe you're, going to stay in the state, staying with another private practice, they use the same insurance company. Usually the insurance company will just roll over your policy into, into your kind of with your new employer, and then you wouldn't have to pay tail insurance. All right, that's a little bit about claims made versus occurrence coverage for NPs. If you have any questions about your employment contract or independent contractor agreement, feel free to contact my law firm at the information listed below in the description. And I appreciate you watching the video. All right, thanks. Take care.